Hello, my name is Dan Chung. I'm a pastor of Lifelight Church of the Nazarene. I'm also a marriage and family therapist. I had privilege of joining your Sunday morning services a few times, and I'm happy to share this Christmas devotion with you. Now, in this season of Advent, as we expectantly wait for Christmas, the word that I ponder often is peace. One of the favorite phrases that I like to hear during this season is the words that angels sang, peace on earth and goodwill to all human beings. I ponder on what that means. So I want to invite you to reflect with me on peace, but not just on the surface level, but go a little deeper, maybe even critical about how we have been thinking about peace. And that comes from the words that Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote from prison. That Christmas message comes to tell us that all our ideas are wrong. Our ideas of success, joy, happiness, safety, maybe even how we think about God or how God thinks about us, how God blesses us and how we bless God. I think what it means is that Christmas gives us a space to examine our ideas, to see if I got it right, if I got it wrong. And it's also about opening up a space for God to come teach us and surprise us. Surprise is what Christmas is all about, isn't it? Uh, I think about Mary and Joseph, who were certainly surprised of the news that they have heard. One of my favorite songs that I had to hear, listen to in this season is called Strange Way to Save the World by For Him. And when you come to the chorus part, it says this. Joseph says, why me? I'm just a simple man of trade. Why him with all the rulers in the world? Why here inside this stable filled with hay? Why her? She's just an ordinary girl. Now, I'm not one to second guess what angels have to say, but this is such a strange way to save the world. I listen to this song and I think about Joseph and Mary, the little town they live in, the future they set out there, even in the midst of their struggle of turmoil, of political unrest, Roman oppression, religious instability, and social imbalance, yet trying to find life meaningful enough to live on. Mary was a young teenage girl betrothed to Joseph. Joseph, not much is known about Joseph, but we know he had good family lineage of David. He had good trade as carpenter and stable work. So their world was harsh and crazy, but their personal lives were good. They had plans and they lived in somewhat of safety of that plan. Then the news comes to Mary and then to Joseph. And we know what that news was. And their lives was no longer ordinary. As a therapist, I imagine them as a couple in counseling, premarital counseling perhaps. And I imagine Mary saying, the angel came and said to me, do not be afraid. And Joseph would say, yeah, the angel said the same thing. He told me not to be afraid. And I would ask them, are you afraid? I imagine they would say, yes, we are. We are afraid of what lies ahead, the uncertainty. In the midst of their fear, the Prince of Peace was born, who said later on, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid. Do not be afraid. Do not let your hearts be troubled. When I think about peace, I think the opposite of peace is fear. And we all have fear, externally and internally. Even if someone looks fine outside, it's most likely that inside they could be anxious, they might be scared. So, the first step on the path to peace, I think, is to acknowledge our fear. The second step is to understand what peace means. We all differ slightly in what comes to mind when we think about peace. Typically, we think about absence of war or conflict as peace, or safety, stability, security as peace. But we know our lives are not ever without tension or conflict or uncertainty. Simply not having any conflict or worries for the moment does not necessarily make it peaceful. Peace, which in Hebrew we understand as shalom, the best meaning I got is this: peace is the way things are supposed to be as God created the world to be. The way things are supposed to be as God created the world to be. So it's not just the absence of war, conflict, or fear. It's more than just a state of mind. The tranquility, the zen of not having any worries or fear. Peace is about restoration of our lives, relationships, human dignity as God has intended for us, individually and as a community. So I think that means true peace faces fear head on, its opposition. And that's what Jesus did. Jesus lived a life of peacemaker by disrupting idea of power, social order, religious order for our sake. And it cost him. Being a peacemaker cost him. So peace is costly, which we don't often think about. I mean, just think, what would it cost you to restore relationships that have fallen apart? Doing the right thing for the sake of goodness, or advocating for the marginalized. And doing all this while working inside you, combating your anxiety, anger, shame, to be restored to wholeness as God intended for you. Peace is not cheap. It's costly. So how do we receive peace? The third stop. And my suggestion is to reflect on these questions. And first one is, what do I fear? Can I honestly acknowledge my fear to God in prayer? That keeps me from opening myself up to receive peace from God. Second question is, what would cost me to receive peace? What do I have to do? And what would that mean for me? And then lastly, we ask, how is God the source of my peace? Would I receive courage and encouragement from God to receive this peace, doing the work that I have to do, even though it would cost me? Jesus is the source of our peace. He has given us peace because He is our salvation. He is our hope. And that's why we celebrate Christmas with joy and love. So whatever your fear is, I pray that you would hear the word of Jesus saying, do not be afraid. May the peace of our Lord Jesus be with you. Blessings.